everyone, welcome back to another episode of the podcast Beautiful You. I'm your host Avantika. Today we are joined by Emily, host of the podcast Your Dose, which was started in May 2023. There was a TikTok reel that went viral, which was basically combating OCD, and it shed a lot of light on her podcast, and which led to her for building a community on Facebook that provides a safe space for people to share their mental health journeys. She was diagnosed with health anxiety in 2021 and eating disorder at the age of 15. Her podcast has wonderful guests on her. She has a lot of wonderful guests on her podcast, and it's a beautiful community that she's building. And I'm so stoked to have her on our podcast today. Welcome to the Beautiful You podcast, Emily. So glad to have you here.
Hi, thank you for having me. I feel honoured that you've asked me to be a guest on the podcast, and hopefully I can share some of my journey and ultimately help others today.
Of course, yeah, I love the work that you're doing, and I'm so glad that we are engaging in this conversation today because I know that there's a lot. It's OCD Awareness Month as well, and health anxiety isn't
Mm.
something which is much talked about. So yeah, I'm so glad that we're putting this out in the month of October as well, and can't wait to get into this conversation with you. So to begin with, seasonal affective disorder is a mood disorder which is characterized by depression that occurs at the same time every year. And it usually occurs in climates when there is less sunlight at certain times of the year. So talking about how you started your journey as a podcaster, you mentioned that you started selling lamps, trying to do something for people with seasonal affective disorder. Could you tell us a little bit about where did that idea stem from?
Yeah, so around this time last year,
Mm-hmm.
I actually launched as Dose, but the company name being Vitamin Dose, and I was working on with a business mentor throughout the month of August and September to try and figure out how I could build a mental health based business which aligned with me. I've always been quite entrepreneurial and I've started a few e-commerce stores in the past, but none of them really truly aligned with my values.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I I experience seasonal affective disorder every single year, and if anyone's listening to this now who is experiencing it, does experience it, they will know how debilitating it is. Even now we're coming into winter in the UK, and I already feel myself tired, struggling to get myself motivated. My skin starts to get bad. It overall, I just feel terrible. And I was doing research around seasonal affective disorder and what are the products that I could sell.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and obviously you've got the usual like supplements, vitamin D, and there's lots of different things. But one of the most effective treatments is light therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And this particular light, it's like a light box and it emits a certain amount of lux. The one that I had sold was 10,000 lux, and when you sit in front of this light for 30 minutes a day, it mimics sunlight, so it gives you the effects that sunlight would give you. Obviously, not exactly the effects of sunlight because it's artificial,
Mm-hmm.
but it definitely helps to boost mood, increase energy, and yeah. So I tested a few different lamps, and back in October started selling some really cute lamps for seasonal affective disorder, and they were like moon shaped lamps because typically the lamps that are sold, the light therapy lamps that are sold, are quite clinical looking. They're not very aesthetic, and so I wanted to sell something that I would personally use that looked nice in my bedroom, that was targeted, to be fair, mainly to females that of a similar age to me. Um, and yeah, I sold the lamps continuously until March, when the weather starts to change. It's longer, brighter days, and typically people start to then, if they have seasonal affective disorder, it typically reduces, if not completely gone by then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So so yeah, that's where all that started, and it did well. It wasn't. I definitely didn't make millions overnight, and it wasn't a groundbreaking business idea, but I felt truly aligned with it,
Mm.
and I really enjoyed it. I received some lovely messages from people who said that the lamp had really helped them, or their husband had been struggling with seasonal affective disorder for so many years, and this is the first thing that's really helped. So yeah, that's kind of where that idea stemmed from.
That's beautiful though, because I've heard a lot about these things, like like you said, vitamins and certain medications and stuff like that. But and that light therapy is one of the things, but to turn that into a business, I love that. That's so beautiful. In
Yeah,
one of
it was
your yeah, sorry, continue. Yeah.
no, sorry, go on.
So I was about to say that in one of your posts, you recently talked about how it was the first time that you ran healthy since you got the eating disorder. Could we, if you're comfortable, could we dwell into that a little bit?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with an eating disorder at 15 years old. And
Mm-hmm.
looking back, I think that I've struggled with OCD a lot of my life, and not actually, and the eating disorder was a part of that OCD. I was very, very addicted to running and exercise in general. With that came the obsession with food and calorie counting, and that obviously evolved into an eating disorder, specifically anorexia. But I really, really struggled with exercise and not and what would happen if I didn't exercise. I would feel very guilty. I would reduce my eating intake on those days, and yeah, it was a genuine addiction. When I was told that I couldn't run anymore because my weight was so dangerously low, that it was just all encompassing. Like, I couldn't deal with the fact that I couldn't go for a run, and I found that a lot more difficult than I found the eating element of it. So ever since I'm 27 now, and there's been a few definitely like relapses, and that's very normal for eating disorders, especially in the first few years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I, I definitely relapsed and became very obsessive with exercise, particularly at university. And then I got better again, and I realized that I wanted to focus more on strength training and weight based exercises.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been my journey ever since. And mostly had a very healthy relationship with food and exercise.
Mm-hmm.
But something that was always very triggering for me was running, because of my previous experience with running. Um, and I always felt like if I started running again, I didn't know whether it would become an addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And so I, in this year of, I think it was around January time, a friend was running a half marathon in London, and I hadn't run for ages. Like, I might do a few odd runs every now and again, but it just wasn't something that I typically engaged in. And I decided to sign up, and I was like, yeah, I feel like I'm in a healthy place again. I feel like I can do this. And it was definitely a risk, 100%. It could have gone one of two ways, but it was absolutely fine. I fueled my body. I didn't become addicted. I actually woke up most of my running days and was like, oh my god, I have to actually go for a run. Like, I do not want to do this,
Yeah.
and I didn't feel guilty for that. Whereas old me would have been like, I have to do this, and and I was and I was doing it for the wrong reasons as well, to try and lose weight. But equally, looking into the OCD side of it, it was a compulsion, and it was something that I compulsively needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think that's definitely something that I've overcome. I still very much um, have. I mean, I cannot go periods of time without exercising, without it affecting me. But then I think that's very normal. I think lots of people rely on exercise for their mental health. So I'm at a point now where it's like it's a healthy relationship basically. But yeah, the half marathon was a huge achievement, and I'm really glad I did it, because I think now I know that I do have that healthy relationship with running.
I'm so proud of you. That's such a long way to come.
Thank you.
So you got your diagnosis with with ED at a very very young age. How did that shape up your teenage and then even like early adulthood years?
Yeah, I mean, when I was diagnosed with an eating disorder, I was 15, but
Mm-hmm.
but I'd probably started with an eating disorder younger than that. And yeah, it was difficult. I Nobody knew what an eating disorder was. I remember starting to feel these feelings of guilt and wanting to exercise all the time, and thinking, why am I feeling like this? I've never felt like this before. What's going on? And I didn't really know how to speak to anyone about it. And so I remember being sat in a classroom at school, actually, and it was a media lesson.
Mm-hmm.
And I went into Google, and I just put in, why do I feel guilty every time I eat food? Which just proves the naivety of how young I was. This was before the world of social media and everything, and this was before a time like now where things are actually spoken about. So I remember it came up, and it was like, maybe it was called eating disorder quiz or anorexia quiz or something, and I just clicked on the first thing that I saw, and I sat and did this quiz. And I remember for the first time in the past, whatever it had been, like a year that I've been experiencing this, maybe not a year, 6 months, it was like, wow, I feel like someone's literally gone into my brain and put everything onto this questionnaire. And I sat and did it, and it was like, I can't remember exactly how the questionnaire was laid out, but it'd be like, um, how often do you feel guilty after eating? And
Mm-hmm.
it'd be like, never, sometimes, or never, sometimes, always, whatever. And like all of my answers were always. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember it got to the end, and it was like, like 100% chance that you've got anorexia or an eating disorder or whatever. Um, and I remember going home and telling my parents that I thought I had an eating disorder. And generationally, I think that there is a stigma around eating disorders, and that's not something that they discussed in their generation. And I think eating disorders always had this connotation that if you had an eating disorder, you were going to die.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I mean, my parents were supportive as much as they could be, but I don't think they really understood.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to the doctors and explained what happened, what was going on. But because I wasn't low enough, from a weight perspective, I was kind of, it was a case of, right, we'll put you on a waiting list, and we'll see what happens. But you're going to be wait on this waiting list for a while. You could be seen at a place nearby, but unfortunately, you've got to be 18.
Oh.
So I was completely turned away, and what could have been very preventable turned into just a huge spiral of me, basically getting worse and worse, and I ended up, yeah, just becoming more and more addicted, and more and more unwell. And it actually got to a point where I went back to school, and at that point, I mean, talking about being young, I isolated myself. I didn't do things
Mm-hmm.
with friends. Everything was very much revolved around eating and exercising. And I don't think any of my friends at the time really understood it, and nor should they have understood it. But I
Yeah.
went back to school, and obviously they've seen me. It was summer holidays, so you've got 6 weeks off. I come back, and I mean, I a teacher actually asked me if I had cancer. So it was really that bad. And then at that point, I got very unwell at school, and it wasn't until the point that I pretty much fainted that things were escalated, and I was given and I was basically fast tracked then from the school to receive some support. So
That sounds a lot. From at a very young age to deal with all of that. Wow.
mm,
How did you go from experiencing excessive? So you also mentioned in one of the posts, I think, where you experienced health anxiety, which I would love to get into in a bit. How did you
mm.
deal with going from panic attacks, getting one of them a day to what you are today? What was your journey like?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, a few years ago, my health anxiety, which I think I've always had. Well, I don't think I know I've always had.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of got to a point where I couldn't really leave the house. Yeah. I mean, my day was just panic attacks all day, every day, and I I actually went to, well, I knew of a therapist, and I reached out to her,
Yeah.
and I probably spent about 6 months in therapy on and off, receiving emotional freedom technique as a form of therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was incredible. It was the first time since my eating disorder that I've ever really sat down and spoken about my life to someone.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of trauma, and I don't think I'm still 100% okay. I still have periods of health anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
but nowhere near as much as nowhere near as much as I had before. Like, in that period of time, I was fully convinced that I was dying every single day.
Okay. That, yeah. Speaking about emotional freedom technique, could you tell us a bit about what is it and how did it work out for you?
Yeah, so emotional freedom technique is a form of energy psychology related therapy,
Mm-hmm.
and it mimics acupuncture. So if you think of acupuncture, which is where um, you have all these acupuncture points all over your body,
Mm-hmm.
and it's believed that within these acupuncture points is stored energy. So typical acupuncture, they'll obviously stab like needles into you, but this is basically acupuncture without the needles. So you talk about your problem, and go through like affirmations and things whilst tapping on these pressure points. And
Oh, okay.
whilst you're tapping on these pressure points and talking, you're actually releasing energy,
Mm-hmm.
and it's extremely powerful. I think for me that normal talking therapy wouldn't be effective. I've never tried. I was on antidepressants for a short period of time when I first went to university, but I've never really been on medication. And the mind and body are connected.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, this form of therapy, or any form of therapy where you're working both your mind and body, to me is the most effective type. And I, yeah, I mean, Janine, my therapist, literally changed my life, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
so grateful for her, because I genuinely couldn't leave the house, and I'm a really confident, sociable person. Um, and it wasn't even just the trauma that I reduced
Mm-hmm.
during this EFT practice, but it was so, but you don't realize how much holding all of that negative energy makes you as a person. And I was not a great person to be around, if I look back. um and so yeah, it's made me a much more positive person, and I definitely see the world in a different way after that therapy. So if anybody is listening and
Mm-hmm.
is struggling with the therapy that they're using at the moment, maybe they don't feel like anything is working, please give EFT a try. It feels really weird at the start, like it's not, you're sat there tapping away. It's weird, but but it's amazing and it's very, very effective.
That is a new technique that I've actually, when I was preparing for this episode, this is one of the newer techniques that I got to know about. It sounds
Yeah,
very fascinating, and I'm so glad that it worked
yeah.
out this well for you. So, I wanted to dwell into your journey with health anxiety. In India, people tend to talk, less about what health anxiety is compared to other disorders. It's one of the lesser known disorders in India, or rather mental health conditions in India. So I just wanted to dwell into, for the audience out there who don't know what health anxiety is, could you tell us a bit about what it is and how has your journey been like with health anxiety?
I mean, health anxiety is an all encompassing fear that something bad is going to happen to you from like a health perspective. And it's, I mean, for me, it's feeling a certain sensation in my body that I don't recognize and straight away assuming that it's a life threatening illness. Um, I do a lot of body scanning, so like checking my body for lumps a lot of the time. So like something that I've been doing quite recently is like checking my neck, and then that will stop, and I'll move on to another part of my body, and I'll obsess over that, whether it be moles or skin tone and color, and what my veins look like. It's yeah, I mean it's googling everything. That's one, and that's classed as a compulsion. Health anxiety is now classed as a form of OCD because of the fact that it's very much around reassurance checking, compulsive checking. So I will, for example, if I think I've got cancer, I might ask my friends to check. Oh, does that look like a lump to you, or can you feel that? Um, and I find that it very much goes around like in themes. So I'll have a certain theme, whether that be like, let's say the theme's cancer, and then maybe I'll get the reassurance that it isn't cancer, but then quite quickly I'll move on to something else, and there'll be something else for me to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
And it very much is around this fear of death and something bad happening to me and me not being able to deal with it. And the thing that I find with health anxiety is it never latches onto something that you can deal with. So if I have a headache,
Mm-hmm.
instead of thinking, okay, so for example, get PMS, and that's like tiredness, headaches, things like that. So that's like the reasonable excuse for why I'm feeling this way. But with health anxiety, you cut out all of the middleman and you go to the absolute worst case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the best way that I can possibly explain it. And it's really, really, really difficult to deal with, and it's difficult for sometimes for the people around you as well, because I don't think a lot of people, unless you go through it yourself, you don't understand it, and so you can end up being quite annoying when, for example, my friends, I'll be asking my mom, what's this? What do you think it is? Do you think it's cancer? Da, 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 da. And for them, that's very difficult. And there's only so much reassuring that they can do, because ultimately they're not doctors.
So basically, it's a vicious loop that you find yourself in, where you're
Yeah,
constantly trying to find. You're anxious about something. It just might be, let's say, you're running a temperature because your body is tired from a hectic day, and you might think, oh,
yeah,
this is something which could lead to something that's death, like life threatening.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, that sounds a lot to go through. Wow,
Yeah.
how did you learn to cope with these anxieties though?
It was quite a simple. I mean, I still have. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm fully recovered from health anxiety, because I don't think that's fair. I'm not. Um, but things that help me are obviously the therapy that I've received. Um, I exercise regularly, which is very helpful for me. having a morning routine is very, very helpful for me. Meditating has been helpful. Um, and I mean, breath work's massive. If I feel something coming on, because often I'll get panic attacks during these flare ups, and yeah, just taking a moment when I can feel it coming on and I'm feeling anxious about whatever it is that I'm worried about, whether it be cancer or brain tumor. You know, all this sounds ridiculous, but these are genuinely the thoughts that I have.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And if it's a really bad flare up moment, I will just sit there, breathe, and yeah, it really helps me to just feel a little bit more grounded because and regulate my nervous system a little bit, because I get very, very anxious very, very quickly. But for me, 100%, exercising, sleep's massive for me. I went to Bali over summer, and that was the first, and I came back, and for the first time, I had a health anxiety scare, and it was 100% from lack of sleep, lack of sleep, drinking, not eating properly, not having a routine, and unfortunately, they are things that I really need, and as soon as my life kind of feels out of balance, I think that's when it triggers these flare-ups typically.
Oh, okay. So it's a course, it's a couple of years and a lot of therapy that helps you be more aware of these triggers, and
Yeah,
um
exactly.
it will take a more couple of years. Is there a cure for health anxiety?
I mean, yeah, any disorder. Well, a lot of disorders can be, I'm not so cured, but managed. And I mean, definitely,
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
obviously when I first had it, which was which was 2 years ago, I wouldn't say there's really now, other than the one flare up that I had, anything that's been as debilitating. So that's really positive, and it shows that it you can have these really, really bad flare ups, but sometimes that's people's entire life, and it doesn't need to be like that. You can learn to manage it. When you do have these feelings come on, it's about recognizing it. And something that my therapist taught me was to almost go against what your brain's telling you. So if your brain's saying you've got cancer, instead of going, oh my god, I've got cancer, what am I going to do? And feeding it, just be like, okay, so what? Yeah, maybe I've got cancer. And it kind of like tricks your brain then, because your brain is like, wait, she's not responding to this, but she usually does. And your brain feeds off that. Whereas if you flip it and give this whole so what attitude, it really helps to calm you down. And that was something that's very, very simple, but been really effective for me.
That's actually really insightful. Thank you for sharing. So, dwelling into both eating disorder and health anxiety, you talk about how it's been a little difficult on on your relationships as well. So, how did it affect your relationship with others? Were they understanding of the conditions, or how did you navigate through the difficulties?
Yeah, I mean, people are as understanding as they can be. I think people probably won't say it, but they probably get annoyed with me asking the same things. And like for them, it probably seems so extreme. Like, why would it be that? Why would that be cancer, for example? So if I guess people around me, they just wouldn't really understand it. And probably get annoyed with me asking the same questions. And I think that trying to navigate that is to not ask people, because that in itself is the wrong thing to do, because you're reassurance seeking. So yeah, trying to not go to those options of asking other people, and because obviously that doesn't solve the problem. That only makes it worse. And if they don't give the answer that I want to have, then it spirals even more. If they say, well, yeah, I mean, it could be that, then instantly
Did you
that
have
makes me panic.
did you have a set of like close friends that you could always confide in? Because I mean, seeking reassurance isn't a bad thing at all. It just makes you more human when you have certain needs. And if you're living with health anxiety, it's completely understandable that you are repeating the same questions again and again. But that's your anxiety speaking. So there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with seeking reassurance again and again when it's done with the right people. So did you ever have a close net of friends or family with whom you could confide in about these things?
Yeah, my mum's really good because I think she knows what I'm like. So she's very good at like listening to me, um, and not being judgmental. Whereas I guess friends could probably dismiss it a little bit more, but not in a bad way, but just because they don't understand it. But they would listen for sure. But I think they just don't. A lot. It's very hard for people. If you're not going through it, it's very hard for people to understand, and for them to obviously want to reassure me and tell me that I don't have what it is that I think I have. But as part of OCD, reassurance seeking is quite bad. It's a compulsion. So they stress that you don't engage in that if you can, because you're feeding the anxiety by doing that.
Oh,
Um, yeah, exactly. So although it is great to have people around you, and obviously I definitely have people around me that I can talk about when these things happen. But I also think that when sometimes I say it, it might not come across as being as serious as it actually is for me. So it might be like, oh, like I'm a bit worried that I've got X, and on the base of it, it might just seem like I'm a little bit worried about that. But what actually is going on in my head is completely different. Like it's an everyday thinking that I'm dying of some sort of illness, and it's really really difficult to live with. So I think the people that maybe dismiss it just don't really get it and maybe don't understand how much of an effect it actually has on me.
hmm, yeah. No, no, 100%. Okay. I did not think about the reassurance seeking as, a compulsion that feeds into it. That's actually really
Yeah,
insightful.
yeah. So it's classed as, which I didn't know until I started to learn a little bit more about it, that yeah, reassurance seeking is actually classed as a compulsion. So
Right,
you're just feeding the problem even more then.
right, right. Okay. You also build a Facebook community group to provide safe space for people to share their mental health journeys. Could you tell us a bit about, the community group, the name of it, if the listeners who are listening to this right now, if they would like to join or recommend it to someone?
Yeah, so found I have found that through this podcast, there was a particular episode, it went viral, and it went viral for two reasons. It went viral because it was controversial, the topic that was spoken about, and it went viral because a lot of people deal with the topic that was discussed.
Mhm.
And it reached so many people. I received so many messages, and yeah, there was a lot of support for the podcast, but unfortunately, that was ruined by quite narrow-minded and hateful comments. And so the podcast and the TikTok and everything had to be taken down. And I thought that was a huge shame because it gave a lot of people the ability to feel less able to speak up and also feel less spoken about disorders. It's when when someone talks about depression or anxiety or eating disorders, it's not really stigmatized. And I find that as soon as somebody speaks up about something which we don't really know much about,
Mhm.
people will be straight on to attack it.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to do something out of what happened on this particular podcast. I wanted to react to it in a mature and healthy way, and that's where I decided to create a community group. And the community group is it's called Your Dose. It's on Facebook. If you go to the link in my bio, there's the Linktree link. You can head over to the community page from there. And yeah, it's a non-judgmental, safe zone for people to share their mental health journeys. It's a lovely place. We've got about 60 members now. I want to keep growing it, and we want it to be, and it slowly is getting to a place where people are putting things in there, whether it be about, advice on something, or for example, at the moment, seasonal affective disorder, a few people have made comments around seasonal affective disorder, and they're struggling with it. Has anyone got any tips? And so it's just a really supportive group of people who are all on their own journeys, and ultimately, just like the podcast is about making people feel less alone and supported, and not feel judged about whatever they're going through, because I think that was the biggest thing that came out of that viral podcast, was that unfortunately someone felt like they could open up about something and they were judged, and that should never be the case.
Absolutely agreed. That's a wonderful work that you're doing, honestly, and I would love to see it grow as time goes by. It
Yeah.
The power of peer support has honestly been a very monumental, has played a monumental role even in my life with bipolar disorder. It's when you see others, understanding what you're going through and they are going through something similar, it makes you feel less alone. And it's
For sure.
absolutely beautiful, the work that you're doing. What is one
Thank
piece
you.
of advice you would give to someone who has been diagnosed with an eating disorder or health anxiety?
The biggest piece of advice I would give would be to not give up, because it's so easy to give up, and it's so easy when you're in that mindset to think that it will always be like that. And it's very easy when someone sits here like me and says it won't always be like that, especially when you're in that state of mind. But it genuinely can get better. And I want to be honest, it's not going to be easy, because nothing worth having is easy. It's I still struggle every day with different things, and it is a mental battle, but it's about learning to manage, find things that help you cope, and finding the small things in life as well. Something that I do every single day now is write 3 things down that I'm grateful for, which is actually originally was very, very hard for me to do. I could barely even think of one thing that I was grateful for, and being able to now sit down and probably could write a whole page of things that I'm grateful for, and having that mindset, I think, completely changes your recovery journey, because even if you're having a shit day, it's like, yeah, today's a really, sorry to swear, today's a really bad day, but I've got these 3 things to be grateful for today, and tomorrow will be a better day. So yeah, I mean, I've just rambled on a little bit, but I think that the main thing is that it really does get better, but you have to be willing to do the work.
Of course, yeah, absolutely agreed. That's wonderful. Is there anything that you that I might have missed out on that you would like to talk about?
No, I think we've covered everything. I'm not sure. I mean, no, I've never done a podcast before, so but I do hope that if there is anyone listening, that my story has helped someone, um, and ultimately made them feel less alone, or realise that it doesn't have to be like that, and you really can get better.
Absolutely. It has been wonderful to speak with you. I got so much insight into what it is like to live with health anxiety and eating disorder. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so the best way would be through Instagram. So my Instagram is _your.dose_, and there's a link tree on the Instagram, and that will take you to my Spotify, community group, TikTok, website, and also my YouTube, which I plan on having all of my videos uploaded by the end of November. All of my podcast videos will also be on YouTube as well.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. I'll be linking everything down in the description below. And for everyone who has been through towards the end, thank you so much for listening. We would absolutely love to know what you thought about the episode. And yeah, you can follow us on @u.pod on Instagram. If you're listening to this on Spotify, we also have a YouTube channel. You can find that out as well. The description again will be in the description below. And yeah, let me know what you guys thought about it. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you guys in the next episode. I love you. Bye.